Today we're going to be starting a science experiment where we are testing the effect of light on plant growth. Right, so remember to review, photosynthesis is the process where plants make their own food in the form of glucose sugar. And to make that food, to do the process of photosynthesis, plants need three things. They need water, they need carbon dioxide, and they need light energy from the sun. So today we're going to do an experiment where we set up three groups. We're going to plant wheat seeds in 2 cups using some soil, our cup here, and we will put some wheat seeds on top. Now, if you don't know, wheat is a plant that is grown, and wheat plant is what we make most of our bread products out of. So loaves of bread, if you like waffles or a lot of cereals, those are going to be made from these wheat plants that we are going to be planting today. So let's talk about a couple things. These are our directions that I'll go over in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about 2 vocabulary words that we're going to need to know about this year. So in science, whenever scientists are doing an experiment, there's 2 important things that they need to identify. First, they need to make sure they have a control group, and they need to know what their variable that they're testing for is. So a control group is the group, the part of the experiment, right? The in our example, the wheat seeds, the wheat plants that we're growing. The control group is going to be the group that is grown under normal conditions, right? Normal conditions. So what a plant needs for photosynthesis: water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. Those are the normal conditions that a plant grows under. So our first group will be a control group, and it will be grown with normal conditions. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is in a moment. The second word you need to understand is variables, okay? So variable, this word, the base word in it, vary, V-A-R-Y, right? This vary is not to be confused with V-E-R-Y. They're both pronounced vary, but vary with an E means a lot of. That is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about vary with an A, which means changes or changing, okay? So variables are the things that change, right? The parts of the experiment that change. We can also, in experiments, we look at variables as what we're testing for. What are we trying to observe? What attribute of this experiment or what condition are we changing so that we can see the effects of it? Now, what do these mean together? Well, we said that plants need what 3 things? What are the 3 reactants for photosynthesis? Water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide. We are going to set up our experiment by planting, using soil and water and planting seeds in these cups. And then we will place these cups into 3 groups. One group of cups will be put in these black grocery bags and placed in the windowsill. A second group of cups will be placed in white grocery bags and placed in the windowsill. And the third group, we will not place in a grocery bag. We will just set them in the windowsill as they are. So one group of cups will be in a black bag. Another group will be in a white bag. And the third group will just be not in a bag, just sitting in the window in the open. So of the 3 things that are needed for photosynthesis, my question to you is, what are we testing? What are we trying to determine? What are we trying to see has an effect on these plants? Or what are we trying to figure out? What are we changing between each of these groups to observe the effect of something, right? Well, when a plant is in this white bag, right, we will still water it every day. It will still have access to the atmosphere, so it'll still be able to get carbon dioxide. So what is the only thing that this group will not be getting the same amount as our normal group will? Well, if we are putting some in this bag and we're putting some in these black bags, what is this bag going to filter out some of, and what is this bag going to filter out a lot of? Well, I hope you decided light was the answer to that, because light is our variable. We are testing how different amounts of light can affect plant growth. So, looking up here at our vocabulary words we put on the board for this experiment. So our control group is the group that is grown under normal conditions. So which of the three groups that I talked about are being grown under normal conditions? We have one group in a black bag, one group in a white bag, and one group not in a bag at all. So which one of those three groups would be under normal conditions? The group that is not in a bag at all. They will have access to plenty of water, plenty of carbon dioxide, and plenty of sunlight. All right, so the control group is the group grown under normal conditions, which is the group that we are not putting in a bag. So what is the variable that we're testing for? Well, what are we changing? We're giving the plant the reactants it needs for photosynthesis. We're giving the plant these three ingredients that it needs, but two of these groups are missing out on one of the reactants. We are creating variables in two of their groups. Well, the group in the white bag will get less sunlight than the group that is just sitting out in the open, not in a bag. And the group in a black bag will be getting even less sunlight than the group in this white bag. So what we have is the group sitting out gets plenty of sunlight, this gets less sunlight, and this group gets even less sunlight. So the variable in our experiment is, what's the only thing we're changing? Light, right? The variable is the amount of light that the plants are getting. So what we will do is, we will do 1 cup. I'll show you how we're setting up one of these planter cups. And then I'll show you where we are placing them in the room. And then over the next few weeks, we can observe them, make some observations, maybe record some data, maybe think about, what we think the outcome is going to be. How different are these plants going to look, do you think? How alike are these plants going to look, do you think? Will their colors be the same? Will their size be the same? All that good stuff, all that wonderful data and observations is to come. For now, let's focus on the directions for our planters. So, remember, control group is what is grown in normal conditions. The variables are what we're changing. In this instance, what we're changing is the amount of sunlight. So let's look at our instructors. Step 1 says fill 2 half-liter containers, almost full with soil using 1.5 cups of soil. So my question to you is 1.5 cups of soil. How many cups is that? Well, you should know that is 1.5 cups of soil. So I have my half cup measuring cup. So I'm going to take a scoop of soil here. All right, so this is a half cup. That goes in. All right, how many more of these do I need? If I'm trying to get 1.5 cups of soil and I have a half cup measuring cup, then I need 1 scoop would equal a half cup. A second scoop will equal 1 whole cup, and a third scoop will equal 1.5 cups. Okay? So we have our cup of soil. All right. Step 2 in our direction says sprinkle 1.25 milliliter spoon of wheat seeds over the surface of the soil. So I have my 1.25 milliliter spoon here. Here are my wheat seeds. So I will take a scoop, and you can see right there, and we want to sprinkle these over the surface. Okay, so now we have a nice even spread of wheat seeds. And our third step says sprinkle an additional 50 milliliters of soil to cover the seeds. So I have my last measuring cup. This one is actually a 60 milliliter measuring cup. So what I will do is I will get a full measuring cup here, and I'm just going to take a little bit out. This is not very scientific, but this topsoil doesn't need to be an exact amount, so this is okay. All right, so I have a little less than 60 milliliters, so hopefully that's about 50, and we will sprinkle this just over the top of the seeds just so they kind of get a nice covering of topsoil. Very good. And lastly, it says pour 100 milliliters of water carefully over the planted seeds. So I have my milliliters here and in this graduated cylinder, and we will pour this over the top. Nice and even all the way around. Very good. All right. Now we have our cups planted. So the next step says close 2 of the planters in plastic bags. And then the next step says place the bagged planters in a warm, lighted location. So what I'll do now, we have our cup. If you're following along at home, or if you're doing this for a makeup assignment, we did this 2 more times. And now I'll go over and show you how we are setting this up in our windowsill. So, as you can see here, in the first of this window and the first placement of this window are the planters that are in our black bags. They will be getting the least amount of sunlight. Here on the other side of the windowsills, you can see the planters that are in our white bags. You can see some light passing through these. So these are the group that will be getting some sunlight, all right, because that bag, if you can see through it, how we can kind of see through these, that means that the bag is blocking out some light, but if we can see through it, that lets us know that some light is going in, which means these plants will be getting some amount of sunlight inside the bag. And third, our third group in the middle here, and in the middle here, are our control groups, right? This is the group that is going to be grown under normal conditions. They're getting the normal amount of sunlight, whereas the white bags are getting a little less sunlight, and the black bags are getting even less sunlight. So we will take our one we just did, and we will add it to the party. All right. Use the information in this video to fill in any papers that you might need to, or fill in any graphs or charts you might need to for any follow-up assignments. And we will check back in here in a few days and see what kind of progress we have. See you. So we have been letting our wheat seed plants grow for about a week. What we're going to do now is make some observations on the 3 different groups of wheat seed plants that we made. So we'll start with the control group that was grown under normal conditions. We will look at the white bag group second that was receiving less sunlight since it was in a white grocery bag. And we will look at the black bag group third, which was receiving the least amount of sunlight. So the video you just watched, planting the wheat seeds, took place exactly 1 week ago, and the video you're about to watch next will be taking place a week later after the plants have had a full 7 days to grow. Today's assignment is called Wheat Seed Investigation Log, and we'll be done on pages 13 and 14 of our science notebook. This is the handout for the wheat seed investigation log. You need to cut right here through the middle, glue this side to page 13 of your science notebook, and glue this side to page 14 of your science notebook. Pause the video, get these 2 pages glued into your journal, and make sure your table of contents is updated with this assignment as well. And you can play the video when you're ready to continue. On page 13 of our science journal, we're going to be completing this chart. We need to make sure our date is filled in with today's date, and we're going to title each of these rows for a different group from our experiment. If you remember, when we planted our wheat seeds, we made 3 groups. A control group that was grown under normal conditions, a group that we placed in a white grocery bag, and a group that we placed in a black grocery bag. So we have 3 groups, 1 control group and 2 variable groups. Our first variable group was put into white bags. Our second variable group was put into second bags. And what was the variable? What were we changing between these 3 groups? We were changing the amount of sunlight that each group gets. So the control group received a normal amount of sunlight. The white bag group received less sunlight, and the black bag group received the least amount of sunlight. So as we move forward, in these boxes, you are going to be writing observations. You're going to write down words to describe how it looks and what has changed since last time. And over here, you will be drawing, you will be sketching out or illustrating what you see. This is our first group, the control group. So what you want to do in our first box here under control is we're going to write down observations. Write down words describing what you see. So maybe include some words talking about the color, some words talking about the size. Use some words talking about what we can see down in the soil. And use some words, I know y'all can't feel it, but it's all, if you were to use some words to describe how it feels, well, if I run my hand over it, we can see that the blades aren't breaking, they are bending and standing right back up. So we can say that the grass is very flexible, and it feels pretty soft and wide and flat. That is all, those are all good bits of information for the observations of the control group. Now take a moment and sketch out an illustration of the control group in this box here. Pause the video if you need. Now I sketched out what I see here, and it resembles the cup that we're looking at, but really this kind of looks more like a hot cup of coffee, because one thing I didn't do was label my drawing. Illustrations in science must have labels. So now if I add a couple labels, wheat grass, these are roots, create some texture and say that that is soil, and the outer layer is the cup. Now this is much more descriptive of what I'm actually seeing. This no longer looks like a cup of coffee. Now it looks like an illustration to resemble our control group. So be sure you're always adding labels to your science diagrams. All right, that's our first group. Let's move on to our second group. This is a specimen from our second group, the white bag group. So, what do we notice here? Well, again, we are now making observations in our box for the white bag group. So once again, we are observing things that we can describe. So describe the color, right? And notice that there is a change in color from bottom to top, so that's important. Right? How do they bend? So still pretty flexible. The blades of this wheat grass are soft, but they seem thinner. They're not as wide as the first one. What can we see down in our cup? So we should be noticing a couple differences, but it might be hard to really tell how different these are until we place them next to each other. So when I have them placed next to each other, would you describe this green as the same as this green? You should notice that this green here is lighter in color. You can also notice that there is fewer blades of grass that are growing, so the population of the white bag group has decreased compared to the control group. Still have plenty of root growth. Okay. Now, sketch what we see here in the illustration part for our white bag group. Remember to include labels. All right, you can pause the video to do that and play it when you're ready to move on. And now we have our third and final group, the black bag group. So this one you should really be able to tell some differences in even without the other two groups up here. You can see that the color green is much lighter. You can see that the population of grass is much less, meaning there are fewer blades of grass in this one compared to the other two. If I push my hand over it, we can see that these aren't bending and breaking, but I can tell you, you can't feel it, but I can tell you that these blades are much stiffer than the other two, and they don't feel as soft or as flat. Let's pull the other two cups back up here and compare. So remember, this is our black bag group with the least amount of sunlight. This is our white bag group with less sunlight than the control, and this is our control group. So now you should really be able to tell the difference between these three groups. Our control group going under normal conditions. Nice dark green color. Our blades of grass are thin and wide. Moving on to our white group, we can see that the color is lighter, especially starting at the bottom, moving our way up. The grass is still very pliable or very flexible, but these blades aren't quite as dark green and aren't quite as wide as our first group. And moving on to our third group, we can see that these blades in comparison are much thinner than the first two. They're much lighter in color, and it's much fewer. There are fewer blades of grass growing in this cup compared to the other two. So we have dark green, flat, wide, soft blades, high population. Lighter green, fewer population of grass blades. And moving over here, we have a light green color with thin, skinny blades of grass and a much, much lower population. So remember, what we were testing for was how sunlight affects plant growth. The control group had normal sunlight and so had the most growth. These other two
were variable groups, the white bag receiving less sunlight and the black bag receive even less sunlight. So what conclusion can you come to on how sunlight affects plant growth? Well, we can see it right here. All right, so normal sunlight, less sunlight, even less sunlight, and we can tell that these are not growing the same. All right, make sure that you are writing words to describe multiple things about these three groups. Make sure you are labeling, illustrating how these groups look and labeling them. And these three illustrations should not look identical, because remember, we're talking about, if nothing else, there is a fewer population of blades moving to the right than there are starting from the left. Make sure these illustrations are labeled, and we will continue with our next section next Monday.